Thanks, Patrick. My name is Chris Stretch. All of you know me, but actually you don't. I'm here. It's my How to Stay Connected series. So the last one was How to Stay Connected when challenges arise, and this one is dealing with social media technology, because the feedback I got from my last talk was that parents really wanted this to be addressed. So I thought a lot about this, and actually it took me a while to kind of come up with it because I really wanted to make sure I had like a novel way of looking at it. But before I go into it, I think there's something to acknowledge. And the thing to acknowledge is that you're the first parents and kids to go through today's challenges, right? I mean, you can't ask your parents and say, hey, how did you deal with Facebook? How did you deal with Instagram? How did you deal with Snapchat? They have no idea. So I think it's worth acknowledging, because I think it really just puts us all in the framework that we're all having this trial and error thing together. And no one has it all figured out. And all of you, and hopefully me helping all of you out, are the trendsetters. I mean, we really are trying to figure out what works, what doesn't, and how can we really effectively get at this very challenging and difficult ordeal in terms of social media technology. So the goals of my presentation: I'm going to talk a little bit about myself, who I am, how did I get here, talk a little bit about human development. I think that's important to address. And also talk about how social media technology has an effect on our neurology, or our brains, beliefs and behaviors, as well as our self-esteem and our self-concept. And then at the end, I'm going to talk about tools on how to deal with the challenges of social media. This is really more social media than technology, but technology is obviously included because that's how social media is administered. And then Gina King is here, and she's going to come in, and she's a school teacher at Palos Verdes, Rolling Hills Country Day School, and she's going to help me out by talking a little bit about her experience with kids. So let's get started. So about me, I grew up in Orange County, and that's me. I was one of 6 kids. I was one of 6 in the family. I was one of 4 kids. My mom, my dad. I love playing sports, and that's me as a teenager. One of the reasons why I really connect with teenagers is because I really struggled when I got to be a teenager. I started to really have a lot of issues, and played some sports, and I had some success, but I ended up having a really difficult time in life. And as some of you know, I ended up having to get sober in my early 30s because I wasn't doing too well. I was really having a tough time with life, and that's what I looked like about 2 or 3 months before I got sober. And then once I got sober, I went and got my master's in social work. And while I was doing that, I coached at Beach Cities Baseball Academy in El Segundo, where I really started to work with young athletes and play around with these different ways of coping and helping athletes deal with things. And I also realized, I already knew it, but I really further realized that I love kids and I wanted to work with kids. So I do a lot of work with kids and teenagers. And my 2 mentors are Dr. Alan Berger, which many of you know, and Dr. Ken Revisa. So Dr. Alan Berger is more on the psychology side. Ken Revisa, he also is a sports psychologist for the Cubs. So I spend a lot of time with him, and that's how I do, where I got a lot of my sports stuff. So right now I do a lot of performance coaching, where I talk to a lot of teams about sports and performance. And I also love working kids camps. And at kids camps, what I do is I go as low as you can see. These kids are 6 and 7 years old, and dealing with the mental game. And Jameson's been there for the mental game, so he's gotten my talks on the mental game. So I actually think that all this stuff can be given to kids as early as 4 and 5 years old. So I really enjoy doing that. And of course, recently I've started talking to some high schools about certain issues that arise with teenagers. This was a talk on vaping that I did at Palos Verdes High School a couple weeks ago. So that's me. And really what I hope to do is, I've been 2 years in my private practice. I just hope to be a resource for the community, for kids, adolescents, in terms of sports, self-esteem, all sorts of different things. So that's really my goal, to support the South Bay community in that way. And so moving on, a good attitude to cultivate while listening to this presentation is that, I don't know if you know this, but if you take a piano and you hammer down on the D note and you put a guitar right next to it, that note is going to vibrate without touching it. There's a resonation that happens through the piano and the guitar. And to me, that's an analogy for an attitude that would be really wonderful to cultivate as you're listening to me talk. which is really that the truth is within you, and that hopefully I can talk fast and I can deliver a lot of information, but really what I'm hoping is that you connect to something from within you connects to something I'm talking about through your own experience, and that's, I think, the best way of looking at it, because then you can take it home and hopefully you can use it and you can make it your own. And this idea of the truth being within us is important to understand because human development, I want to talk a little bit about human development in that, we are all like an acorn that is growing into an oak tree. And the reason that's important is because early psychology and early religion told us that we were bad and parents had this great responsibility of making us good. And what came out in the 50s and 60s with Dr. Karen Horney and humanistic psychology is we are actually wired with a seed of potential, and that potential can grow, and we can grow along the lines of our potential. All we need are certain things, just like the acorn needs water, it needs space away from another oak tree. If it gets everything it needs, it grows to its potential. So the reason why that's important is that I think a lot of parents try to do too much, right? Because the goal, to me, the best two roles of a parent is a boundary setter and an emotional coach. And if I set boundaries and I coach my child emotionally, they're going to naturally gravitate along the lines of their potential. So I think the greatest gift a parent can give to a child is a connection to their own authentic self, their own inner integrity. And there's an issue that arises, and this issue comes before social media even gets into the picture. And that issue is what I call the conspiracy. And the conspiracy is our culture, okay? In our culture, very quickly, and this is just how a capitalistic, consumerist society works, right? We are constantly being told who you are is not good enough. I mean, how else would products get sold unless they showed someone really attractive and they said, you need to be like this, and by the way, buy this while you're at it. So there's a conspiracy in our culture, and I think the three things that are inherent in this conspiracy that happens before social media is involved, that happened before social media even came on board, is number one, my value is what the outside world thinks of me. Number two is my value is in how I compare to other people. And number three is my value is in achieving an outcome. Okay? So that is, to me, the conspiracy. If we're not careful and we believe everything we're being sold on a moment-by-moment basis, we can... So if you think of it, we have this miracle grow within us, and that miracle grow, that growth force within us can either grow us along the lines of our potential and our authentic self, or it will grow us along the lines of this conspiracy, where I'm constantly being obsessed with external validation, comparing myself to other people, getting to some outcome and being overly anxious about this outcome that I have to get to. So to me, it's important to understand that that's what we're already dealing with before social media comes into the picture. That's what we're already dealing with. And actually, in a lot of families, and my family included to a certain extent, the parents raise their kids in a way that kind of pushes this conspiracy into the mix, right? That, hey, you got to be someone that people like. You have to compare well to others. You have to get good grades like Johnny. You got to look a certain way. So even families, in a certain sense, can somehow push this conspiracy along a little bit as well. Rather, the other way of doing it would be to connect the child with themselves and their inner authenticity. So we're already got this conspiracy going. And so if you look at the effects of social media, if you look at the effects of social media, the big word to me is influence. Social media has an incredible amount of influence on us. I mean, we all know that. But it is incredible how much influence it has. So if you take into consideration the conspiracy that I believe we have in this culture, and then you take the influence that we have, and then now you look at how it affects our brain. So the two things that I really think stand out from the science in terms of how social media affects our brain is, number one, it triggers our dopamine receptors. So the way I think of it is this, think that the 5-year-old or 4-year-old kid that says, throw me up in the air, right? And you throw them up in the air 4 or 5 times, and they want you to throw them up in the air like 30 times, right? That's that child's dopamine receptor saying, I want more, I want more, I want more, right? So what social media, actually all technology does, is it triggers our dopamine receptors, and it forces us into this place where we want more, we want more, we want more. And its mechanism for doing this most of the time is notifications. Notifications is that app, that social media app, that game coming into you and pulling you and saying, no, 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 you want more of this. The majority of this dopamine receptor thing comes from notifications. The other thing that happens in terms of neurology is that our right brains are our emotional brains, and our left brains are our logical brains. Our right brains are connected to our limbic system, which is then connected to our bodies. So when we have one-on-one interaction and relationships, we are nurturing our right brain because there's a tactile experience with having a one-on-one connection. What they're finding is, and this is a quote from Dan Siegel, and if you've never heard of Dan Siegel, look him up, he's phenomenal. He's a neuroscientist. What he says is the brain created social media, and now social media is reshaping the brain. They're literally proving that people that have the majority of their relationships through the internet, through social media, end up developing a neurological imbalance where their left brain is doing the connecting rather than their right brain, and that's not good. It creates shallow relationships. It creates an experience of feeling like you have friends when you don't have any friends because there's not that intimate physical connection. So to me, when I looked at this talk, I didn't want to make it too long and too informational, but those two things I think are so huge to understand. That number one, it's pulling our dopamine receptors in and triggering us into wanting more and more and more. And the other thing is it's literally reshaping our brains to where connections are becoming more and more shallow and having less depth. If the majority of our engagements with other human beings is through the internet, through social media. So now on to beliefs and behavior. There's a study that came out in UCLA. So waking up in the morning and being completely obsessed with followers, likes, and what happens is that creates, there's, Krista and I know a girl that had 30,000 followers, and then she changed her pictures to be a little more scantily clad, and then she went up to like 200,000 followers. I know a guy that got on steroids and literally went from 50,000 followers to I think he's got 600,000 followers. And it's this, and they seem confident and look at me, but it's totally a self-obsessed way of living. And it's very easy trap to fall into because they look so happy and so wonderful. And the more followers you get if you go into certain industries, the more opportunities there are. So it's really loaded. So the solution. So this is where I want to present something that I've never heard before. Because I work with a lot of kids, and I get a lot of kids that come in, and there's two different types of parents that I've seen. One parent is, do whatever you want to do, 10 years old, 11 years old, kids got a phone already, and they're already doing stuff, and the parent is kind of involved, not really. That's one side of the thing. The other side is, social media is terrible. It's awful. Every second I can keep my kid off social media is good. I have to keep them away. It's toxic. It's terrible. Okay? I think neither is the solution. Because if the problem is influence, the solution has to be more influence. But I'm talking about influence through connecting with our kids. Connection over control. Not controlling our kids. Yes, there'll be times when control happens, right? Are there times when you have to be controlled? That's right. Would you prefer to be connected to? That's right. So connection more than control. But we need to have more influence. So what does that mean? Know and even use the technology. Got to get in there. You gotta figure out, what is Snapchat? How does it work? What does it look like? I encourage you to just know and use it. And remember that it's back to this acorn to oak tree. When you're dealing with social media, you want to talk to the best self of your child from the best self of who you are. And recognizing that I'm boundary setting and I'm emotionally coaching. And an important aspect of that is managing anxiety. Very hard for anybody to emotionally coach somebody that is so overwhelmed with anxiety and fear. So boundary setting. So boundary setting to me is rights and privileges. To me, if you have younger kids, I do not think it's a good idea to get a child their own phone unless they've contributed to it. It's kind of like, I have no problems with like, hey, there's an extra phone in the house and you get to use it. But I just don't understand why someone would give an 11-year-old his or her own phone. Because what you're doing is, when rights and privileges get brought up, that child thinks that phone is their right because it's their phone. And I don't agree with that. Now, at some point in time, there might be a system set up to where it's like, hey, if you contribute, you work hard, every dollar you put in, $2 that I'll put in, whatever, if they earn it and they've earned the right to have it, I agree with it. But I think it's a big setup when, for a 10-year-old or 11-year-old, your birthday, they get a phone automatically. Now, and it's a right. It's not a right. It's a privilege. Rights are, house over your head, food, clothes. Privileges are things you earn, and you have to, follow through with certain things to earn these privileges. The other thing is in-home boundaries that parents work on too, right? So I was in a classroom in Palos Verdes after I did the vaping talk. The psychology teacher asked me to do a talk, and they had this drape that came down, and there was a spot for each seat in the classroom, and they were numbered, and all the seats were numbered. And it was awesome. When the kids came in the class, they immediately put their phones in their slot and they sat down. I think that would be a phenomenal thing to do at home. We have a deal, and everybody does it. Everybody, not just the kids, but the parents. Whether it's, okay, we're going to shut it down at 8 o'clock, technology, everybody gets their slot, puts it in there. Now we have that one-on-one interaction, or whether it's time during the weekend. But I think in-home boundaries are important because that's when you have influence. There's not a lot of influence once kids get out of the home, because what I've seen time and time again, when parents try to do too much with the cell phone stuff, kids just, especially when they get to 12 and 13, don't get any ideas, they just grab their friends' phones. And then boom, they're on their friends' phones. And it's like, mom took away my phone, let me have your phone all period. And that's just the reality. So if we're going to have this influence that I'm talking about, let's have it at home. Let's use get the most out of our home situation because we have influence. Now the other one is emotional coaching. Now if you have a young child, this to me I think would be a wonderful idea. Instead of making social media out to be the worst thing in the world and keeping your kid away from it, I think a better way to do it would be to have a father-son, father-daughter, daughter-son, son-mother, joint account, and have it together, and sit down and talk about all the things that I'm talking about. Spend once a week, sit down, look at feeds, talk about what does it mean when someone gets likes. Plant that seed of truth into them. Likes does not mean that person is worth listening to. Likes does not mean that person, followers and pictures, likes on pictures or followers on profiles, does not mean that person has anything to say that's good. Actually, the opposite could be true. A lot of people get likes and get followers because what they're posting is not aligned with authenticity and authentic values, right? But how cool would it be to sit down on a weekly basis and go through feeds and talk about, why do we post pictures? If I'm posting something, I'm putting it out into the ozone, everybody gets to see it. Why would I do that? So to me, I think that's a much better way of doing it, where you're connecting with the child, you're helping them understand how it works, you're planting these seeds in to counteract the things that we know are going to happen, and then now you get a connected experience with the child. Because let me tell you, when your kid, true or false, Patrick, when your kid gets to Snapchat, is it all over?
No.
It's not all over?
Well, depending on what you
when a child gets to Snapchat, what happens is now there's so many ways for them to do things that can't be seen. Right? If you're following your kid on Instagram, and hopefully you're connected enough to where you're following each other on Instagram, you're seeing what they're doing. Once you get to Snapchat, like the majority of what they're doing, you're not seeing. It comes, it goes, it's done. So why not, because Snapchat's usually not I think Snapchat's the last domino, right? And I think, why not use the time prior to Snapchat to help plant the seed of like, hey, let's understand how this works, and let's really understand what goes into this, and let's not fall into the trap of having our beliefs and behaviors influenced by what people are posting. Let's not do that. Let's stay connected to ourselves. while we're engaging in social media, and then while you're having that little engagement, you can also practice good boundaries. How often should we do it? Things like that. So I think, to me, I think that's a better solution than the demonizing effect and trying to keep them away as much as possible. So, and to me, talking about demonizing social media, I think this is a great principle. You know, giving respect, you know, as more important than getting or demanding respect. When parents, you know, put social media in this totally negative category, it is really disrespectful to kids. I remember when my mom called the TV the boob tube, and it was really disrespectful to me, because that was the coolest thing in the world to me. And actually it caused me to want to do it more, so I could say, screw you. That's important to me, and you're talking trash on it, right? If my mom would have coordinated with me and not disrespected me in terms of what I was interested in, and found a way to coordinate with me and connect with me, I probably would have been more amenable to like obeying her. But, you know, I didn't quite do that well. But, so I think this is a great principle. So that's why I've given this, this has been teenager approved, because I've given this presentation in short form to a lot of my different clients, and all of them say the same thing. I'm sick and tired of my parents going out and hearing these talks on social media and coming home freaked out and telling me how terrible it is, and it's something I love. They just get, and that connection is lost. Once I start coming home, it's evil, it's terrible, right? No, I don't think that's the right way to go. The other one is lead from behind rather than lead from the front. And if you're old like me, you remember who this is. Remember that guy? Columbo. It was a 70s show where the detective got all his information through curiosity and playing dumb. And he would solve crimes. He'd be like, tell me more about that. I don't know, so you got a gun, and what did you do with that? Okay, tell me, And it was a way for him to get information, and that was that to me is a way of like, how do you lead from behind? Tell me more about that. So if you do that, okay, does that make sense to you? Is that your best self? Okay, tell me more. Explain to me exactly what you're doing here. Instead of, I get what? Why'd you, So, lead from behind rather than lead from front. Another one. Without controlling your kids, but through connections, turn off notifications. And every kid that I've ever talked to, when you have an open dialogue, they're okay with this. If you explain it to them. Do I want to control the app, or do I want to give the app permission to control me? And if you ask it that way, and you're engaging from myself to their best self, every one of them will say, no, I really don't want the app to control me. I have kids that will say to me that they're addicted to their phones, but then I say, would you ever say that to your parents? And they say, absolutely not, because I get it and I told you so. Yeah. Right? But they know this stuff. They're struggling. A lot of them are struggling, and they don't want to talk about it because they don't want to get, and I told you so. Because to me, what's happening is the connection is being sacrificed by the anxiety and the control and the criticism. So, through a connected conversation with kids, I would really encourage you to have a conversation about shutting off notifications. And I have a teenage girl that I talked to about this, and she said, oh yeah. I totally did this because I realized when notifications were coming up, my self-esteem and how I felt about myself was really suffering. So I shut it off, and I just look at Instagram like once or twice a day. I just think that's a great way to go about it. The other thing is inquiring and coaching and sharing. More important or greater than telling, fixing, spying, and controlling. Now here's the thing. I think that parents should know everything their kids are looking at. But what's the intent? Kids are so smart. If your intent is to spy and control, they know that so quickly, and you will get so much resistance. Giving space for kids to come in and be their authentic, real self really has a huge effect. I had parents and a kid. He was 16 or 17 years old at the time. They came in, and I asked I said, what do you guys want to talk about? So the parent immediately just hammered away at the kid for his grades. It was like, his grades, he's just suffering his grades, and his son shut off, and he's just like, whatever, I don't want to hear about it, just shut off. So I said to him, well, let's stop for a second. Let's redo this. Rewind. Okay. So I asked the dad, I said, instead of just jumping in, attacking him for his grades, how about you say, I gave him some words. Hey son, where are you at with your grades? So, took a second, sorry. Hey son, where are you at with your grades? Kid starts crying, he says, I'm struggling with my grades, I'm having a tough time, I need a tutor, this sucks. So you can see the shift. You know, when there's space and there's inquiry and there's connection, a lot of times, you know, kids and even teenagers, as difficult as they are, they'll show up. They'll show up. So the next one is example greater than lessons. A lot of kids will get on their parents about being on the phone too much. It's awful hard to be getting on your kids or working through the social media stuff. And the other examples is like, you know, posting and why we post and all those things. And I think it'd be great to just, you know, post something really cool and just, you know, this is what I've just posted this. Maybe it's an inspirational quote or something, and this is why I do it, and this makes me feel good. And it's like you're setting a good example versus lessons like you should do this and you should do that, and you should do this and you should do that. Meanwhile, I'm on my phone too much. So I think examples should be greater, needs to be greater than lessons. So now we have the benefits of social media. And actually, someone brought this to my attention just the other day. I just added it to it. So the first thing is you get to learn about your kids. You know, if there's a connected relationship and you're connected to them via Instagram, you know, a lot of these kids, they share themselves very clearly on social media. So you get to learn about what they're doing. You get to learn about what's important to them. You get to learn something that may open up a dialogue later on that night to talk to them about. You know, you get to know them a little bit better, know what makes them tick, you know what's going on with them. And you get to encourage them to inspire. You know, if you're having those coordinated and connected conversations, you can talk about, you know, what do we want to put out into the world? And maybe do some encouraging, like, well, how about, I mean, the reality is that, you know, J.J. Watt raised like $10 million on Twitter for the Houston thing, right? The hurricane. You know, I mean, Gina and I actively are on Facebook or Instagram, and it's been huge. And almost everything I post is trying to put out a good message. You know, so social media isn't a bad thing. So if there's in a sense, it can be bad, but if there's a way to have these connected and coordinated conversations, you can encourage your kids to inspire, use Instagram or social media to inspire. And the other thing that I think is great is that, and this is kind of back to lead from behind rather than lead from front, which means that make curiosity greater than criticism. You know, get the information first. Hey, what's going on there? I'm curious as to what you did that. You know, like for instance, a good one is kid comes home and breaks curfew, right? And of course, I have no kids, so you know, what do I know? But I'm sure this is a lot easier said than done. But kid breaks curfew, and instead of you broke curfew, it's like, so tell me, what was so important that you had to come home 30 minutes past your curfew? Was it that important? Was it important enough to, you know, lose your certain privilege, or you know? I mean, trying to get information first. I mean that, you know, because to me, you can always drop the hammer later. You can always get the information and go, okay, I've listened. And you know what? That's a bunch of blank. You know what? I really think, you know, you can always come down later, but why not give them an ability to come forth, right? And the curiosity doesn't equal condoning. I think a lot of times when I sit with parents and kids, it's just like, I find that parents have such a hard time being curious about things, like say cannabis or things like that, because if they are even curious, they feel like they're condoning the behavior, and that is not true. When you're curious about something, you're not condoning it. You're just getting to know what makes them tick. And in that curiosity, there's an openness for that teenager, for that child, to actually say something like, I'm struggling with this, you know, I need help with this. And that's the best place to be. And then concern greater than disappointment. And just where, you know, come from a place of concern if you can, rather than disappointment. You know, it's not the parent's job to live up to your expectations, Jameson, and it's not the kid's job to live up to parents' expectations. And a lot of our disappointment comes from our expectations. But if we can come from a place of concern, then we're more likely to maintain that connection. And then multiple hats greater than one hat. And this to me means that there's times to be this boundary setter and this, you know what, enough is enough. This is where I'm at with that. And there's times to be playful and enjoy it and be friendly. I mean, people are like, I'm your parent, I'm not your friend. Well, a good parent knows when to be a friend and when to not be a friend. But there are times to be a friend. You know, there are times when that's important. And there are times when that's not okay, not cool. We need to set boundaries and we need to be firm. And then belonging, more important than accomplishing and achieving. Dan Siegel tells this great story. And once again, if you get a chance, he's got all these awesome books. The Whole Brain Child is a great book. He's got another one on The Whole Brain Teenager, I think, something like that. And he's in with this tribe in Namibia. And he's at almost like a campfire. And he's with these people, and they're all happy, and they're living in third world conditions. They don't even have running water. It's like they're living the same way their ancestors lived hundreds and hundreds of years ago. And they're so happy, and they're smiling. And so he asked one of the individuals at the campfire, said, you know, why are you so happy? What is it that makes you smile so much? And through a translator, and it's, you know, I'm not going to cry, but it's pretty powerful when you watch him tell the story, because he tears up when he says this. And he says, and the guy said, basically, because we belong. That's it. And I think a lot of what's going on now is we're focusing so much on getting to that next place and accomplishing and achieving, whether it's, I mean, does Palos Verdes really need 38 AP classes? I just don't know if that's, you know, I mean, there's just so much going on there, and I don't think we spend enough time just encouraging this idea that we just belong. You know, we belong, and hopefully we belong in our own skin, we belong in our families, and I think, you know, social media and technology, if we're not careful, it adds to this constant quest to get to some other place other than here and now where we belong. And so the 4 words that I would encourage you to use or to engage in as you are going about dealing with these difficult things are invite. Invite your kid, your child in to talk about this stuff. Leave an opening for them to talk about what's going on. Connect with them in a way where you can, really stay connected. Collaborate on solutions. Collaborate. What would make sense here? Make sure that you get all the data out, right? I mean, I think that stuff's important. The dopamine receptor stuff and how it does affect the brains if there's too much of it, how it totally affects beliefs and behaviors. Let's talk about that as a dialogue. And let's collaborate on a way that we can use this that doesn't where we don't fall out of the bed too far on one direction, one side or the other. And the other one is coordinate. So I had one client, and just imagine being a 14-year-old and having this happen. Whereas his parents went to a social media talk, I think it was at Redondo Union High School, I don't know what they said, and he gets slapped an 8-page contract the next day that he has to sign. He flipped. And here's the interesting thing about it. When we went through that contract, he actually was okay with every part of it. But the way it was delivered was so non-collaborative and uncoordinated that he wanted nothing to do with it. And he fought and fought and fought because he did not appreciate how that was presented. So, I think there's a place for agreements and maybe contracts, but it's got to be a coordinated thing where everybody sits down and comes up with the best plan moving forward. So, I have a cake and a topping on the cake analogy. So, to me, I think our goals as parents and our goals as people is to become full and complete cake. What that means is that if I have this authentic, self-integrity-based value system, then I am responsible for determining my value. And I see myself as a human being, and I am full and complete on my own, by myself, with myself. And hopefully I can get to a place where when I get a like on likes or whatever on a picture, that's icing on the cake. We all like to get positive feedback. Nobody doesn't, right? But instead of being part of the cake where I got holes in myself and holes in my self-esteem, and I'm filling up, that with icing, which is, likes and followers and, validation from the external and comparing appropriately, I fill myself up completely with me, with my authentic and real and true self. And that way, when I post something, I push post, I walk away from it, and I'm good. Because I decided that I liked what I did there, and it was cool, and it was good, and I'm not going, oh my god, how many likes did I get? But, you know, because that's what kids are doing. I had one kid that posted a YouTube video because he was depressed, and he got more depressed because only 6 people viewed it. I mean, that's the kind of solutions they're coming up with. And so it's so important that we try to help them develop this sense of themselves that isn't comparison-based, that isn't so other-validated, and that isn't so outcome-based, that we could just plug along in our lives and be okay where we're at, full and complete. So, that being said, Gina is a teacher at Rolling Hills Country Day. She's also founder of My Worth Girl, and she is runs these groups outside of school, and they've been really successful where she works on empowering young girls. And when we had talked about, when I talked about what I was doing, she talked to me about some experiences she had as a teacher and as a group coordinator, and I thought it would be so awesome if she came up and shared them because they seem to be so in line with what I'm talking about. So, Gina.
Thank you. Hello. I see some familiar faces, but yes, thank you, Chris, for having me. My name is Gina King, and I've been a teacher for over 11 years, and I've been at Rolling Hills Country Day for 6 of those years. And in the last 4 of those years, I've started doing girl and boy talks at my school for the 4th and 5th graders. We meet once a month, separately. We just started talking about friendships and rumors and gossip and how to, learn about those things and how to react to those things. And as those 4 years have evolved, it's really evolved into my self-worth, like learning who I am, learning about my worth, learning about my value, and self-love. And as I've done, these classes at my school, it then turned into My Worth Girl because I saw the growth in my students and I saw these amazing things happening that I wanted to help kids all across the country and especially in the South Bay. So that's why you can see up there I have My Worth Girl. So that's what I'm all about. When I was talking to Chris about what we're doing, the challenges of social media, I really connected it back to My Worth Girl because I'm teaching my students, especially at my school, about who am I? Not who I think I should be, not who I think my parents want me to be, not who I think my friends want me to be, but like really, who am I, right? And when a child has a clear sense of who they are, and they have a clear sense of their value and their worth, then they're starting to be at a higher self, right? So we can connect all of those things to what Chris was saying about understanding who I am and going back into social media. But I wanted to share something that I do with my students that I've seen such tremendous growth that it's really what Chris has talked about, the parents and child collaborating. So when I was in 6th grade, so a little lesson about my life, but when I was in 6th grade, I had just started middle school, and I was so excited, and I loved this reading class. My reading class, I loved reading, I loved these books, and I would participate, and I would be engaged in the discussion, and I loved it, loved it, loved it. And my report card came home for the first time in middle school, and I got an A in the class, but I got a 3 in citizenship. And 3 at my school, a 1 was excellent, 2 was good, and 3 was, you're not doing so good. And my mom and dad said to me, okay, so why do you have this 3? And, we're used to our kids going, I don't know, it must be my teacher. But I truly had no idea why I had a 3. I said to my parents, I don't know. So, my parents, you get your report card, and then we can all relate to parent-teacher conferences because we've all been there. But I'm sure that you can also relate to when you were the kid, when your parents went to the parent-teacher conference without you. So my parents went to the conference to talk about Gina King with my teacher without Gina King, right? They're going to discuss why I have this 3, what I'm doing right, what I'm doing wrong. And Gina King is nowhere to be found because I'm at home waiting to hear what's going on at school, right? So my mom came home that night and said, okay, well, your teacher said that, you're doing great. You have an A, you're understanding the material, but you're talking way too much. And I said, well, what does that mean? Because I feel like I'm participating, I don't know what that means. And she said, I don't know, you're just talking too much, And she also said that when you raise your hand, you're super excited, but if she doesn't call on you, you make a face. And I said, well, what face am I making? Because I honestly had no idea. Because my teacher had never communicated that I was making a face. And I said, I don't know what face that is. And I truly didn't know. And my mom said, well, just be aware of that. I thought I had this voice. I was super excited. I was engaged. I loved this class. And I went back the next day. I remember I sat back in my chair and I did not raise my hand. And I sat there. And I was so afraid to make a face because I didn't know what the face was that I was making. And I was so afraid to raise my hand because I thought that means I'm talking. When is it okay to talk? When is it not okay to talk? But the problem was I lost my voice because no one talked to Gina King about it. No one told me what I was doing wrong. So now that I've become a teacher, like full circle, for the last 11 years, I've had my students come to every single conference. And I've taught first and second grade, and those first graders were at that conference, and we talked about how are we doing and what is that expectation, which is so important. And especially when a child has a voice, and when a child understands their worth and understands their value, like I just was saying, they are at their highest self, but they have an empowered sense of their self too. They feel better and they feel confident. So my last conference that I had, and I have a couple of my parents that were at that conference, but I had my students a couple of days before, I asked them this question, and I said, what is your goal? We have now, March, until June. What is your goal? And I don't want you to tell me your goal. I want you to think about it and I want you to reflect. What is your goal? And then I want you to tell me why. And it can be academic or it can be self-improvement. Anything you want, and I'm not going to tell you what I think your goal needs to be, right? You tell me what you want your goal to be, but then you need to tell me why. That's what Chris was talking about, like the curiosity. Well, why is that your goal? So is it because it's really your goal? Or is it, I think this will make my parents happy if I get all A's on my report card, right? So when we can understand why we've chosen this goal and your child has this voice, then magic happens. After they had to tell me the goal, then explain why, then I said, okay, so what do you need from me? What do you need me to do to either hold you accountable or to encourage you to reach this goal? And then they had to write, what do I need from my parents? Do you need your parents to continue doing what they're doing? Do you need your parents to do something different? But you need to be specific so that they understand. Okay, so they wrote this letter. We spent 2 days on it. I wanted them to read it the first day, come back with a new set of eyes the second day, change it. This is theirs. So when we walked in, so when my parents and the students walked into this conference, we sat at this table, just, 2 parents, the child and myself, and I handed them what they wrote, and they read it to their parents, and I'm telling you, it was like the best conference I've ever had with all of my kids. It was, to me, magic. I was sitting there watching children and their parents connect on a level that maybe they've never connected at, because a child was able to communicate what they wanted. So a couple of examples. One of the examples was, and again, we talk about self-love all the time in my school, so my kids know these terms and they use them all the time. But one of my little boys wrote, my goal for June is I want to get better at my self-love, because I've been saying really mean things about myself. And Mom and Dad, what I need from you is to keep doing what you're doing by saying really nice things to me. But when you hear me say something mean about myself, I need you to stop me and make me say something better about myself, like change it to a positive. And Ms. King, I need from you to keep teaching me about self-love and to encourage me as well. And so we were all on the same page, and the parents were like, oh my gosh, I didn't know that that's what you were working on. Yes, I'll be aware of that's what you need from me. And the child was like, oh.